The Hail Varsity Radio Saturday morning show. Strap yourselves in. Here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt.
Y'all don't even know he was a virgin until he's 28, and now, roll tide.
And Mark Kraynak.
Time has come for someone to put his foot down. And that foot is me.
Welcome to it, weekend editions here. It's Hail Varsity Radio. Chris Schmidt, Mark Kraynak, Elijah Herbel. Hope you're doing all right. We are, I don't want to say off to a sputtering start, but alarm was set.
Dude, that was great.
and then I hit snooze.
That was so good.
And I get a phone call from Mr. Kraynak, and I answer it. And it's on speaker, and the alarm's just blaring in back. So he's like, hey, Schmidt, I hear that you just got up. Meanwhile, the wife is like, don't you guys have a show to do? So, yeah.
See, that sucks that you're married to somebody that talks like that. You know, that would get old after a while.
Think of Linda Blair in The Exorcist. That's what my wife sounds like.
Don't you guys have a show? Kiss me, you bastard.
Like, that's rough. That's rough. You endure a lot there.
So does she.
No, but that was classic, though. Like, so I call Schmidt, because this is the great thing about our non-radio podcast, weekend edition, whatever. That's the great thing about it, is that it is a flex start time. Right? Flex.
It's called the lazy ass start time.
It's a flex start time. We can go 7:30, we can go 7:45. It's 7:48. So I call, and then you answered really quickly.
I was up. So I was just swearing out loud because I was intending to be up 25 minutes earlier. I was with the German Shepherd. I laid back down, and I didn't do anything last night. We got home from baseball at 10:30, and I went to bed.
I think what happened is you hit snooze. You started reading an article, and then you dozed off. And then when I called, you're like, ugh, and you just answered right away. So as soon as he answers, I'm just hearing, boop, 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 boop. No answer from Chris, just an answer of the phone call, and boop, 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 boop. Like, Chris, you with us? You're like, hey, bud, how's it going? And he sounded kind of chipper, too. It was good.
Better than you.
Well,
where you at?
We've all had that moment where you wake up, like, you've fallen asleep after your alarm, and then you wake up with the start whenever you realize what you've done. Like, you wake up and realize, oh no, like, I don't know if that was 2 minutes or if that was 45 minutes and I'm now late for work. We've all been there. So, man. I get that feeling.
Yeah, or those days where you don't know what day it is. Like, literally. Like, you wake up, you're like, oh my God, I got to go to work. You're like, I don't have to go to work. Oh my God, it's the weekend. Well, I got to the radio show, podcast. Like, yeah, it happens.
I did wake up fearful for a moment because it was 6:03. It's like, oh, it's Saturday. I'm okay. I'm good. I've got another hour. So I did have that moment. But great to be with you, weekend edition, and your chance to talk and interact with us via the StreamYard. Can do so with the Hail Varsity YouTube channel and subscribe to that. Great content, video content, always uploaded for you with Aaron Sorensen and Brady Altman's, Drake, Keeler. I mean, just a bunch of folks get it done for you on the digital side that way with the YouTube channel. We always put the podcast and live stream the show that way. Hail Varsity Radio at HVarsity Radio. Twitter is where you can follow us. Busy week. Elijah and I were talking about just how
out of nowhere too, right? It just sort of like boom, 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 boom.
It happened. We always kind of knew this weekend was going to be interesting on the recruiting front, and it is with a workout today by McMorris with the Nebraska coaches. A quarterback for 2025 that's also back in town. We'll go there in a moment. But satellite camps for Coach Rule, NIL front and centers for Coach Rule down in Texas. That was impressive. But the schedule is the big thing, fellas, with the Big Ten doing their NFL drop or tribute with the 2024-2025 season. Kraynak, you've been to a ton of spots. I've had the pleasure to go with you to some memorable games and some memorable destinations. It's been so much fun over the years, the handful of times we've gone to games together. I want to get your take as far as the West Coast. I don't remember. Have you been out to SC or UCLA?
Yep, went to USC, have not been to UCLA.
So you went in 05.
Yeah, 05 or 06. Yeah, it must have been 05. No,
it was 05. It was 06. And then
because then they came
here.
Here 07, and that was the beginning of the end of Callahan. Because they just boat raced Nebraska. And that's when you knew that 07 was not going to go well, even though they used to break huddle by saying national championship. Remember that? They actually did that.
Yeah,
that happened in 07.
That worked from a motivational standpoint.
Yeah, you know when you break down, you get together after like a workout. 1, 2, 3, national championship. And then USC just proceeds to full back dive through truck-sized holes and any hopes of that. But back to your original point, yes, been to USC, and it's in the hood, right? It's right. It's in South Central, and then there's USC that's gated and fenced, right? Yeah. It was, and the Coliseum is cool from a mystique standpoint, from just like a basic architectural standpoint. It was, the Olympics were there back in God knows when.
84.
30s. Okay. 30s sounded better. Yeah. So it looks cool. It looks cool. Obviously, if you've never been to Southern California, I've only been a couple times. Southern California is, like, weather-wise, just brilliant. Like, you understand why, mankind decided to completely destroy a very beautiful part of the planet, because it is like, it's something, man. The weather's great. Brilliant sunshine. There's hardly any wind. Mountains in the background. Incredible. But it's the biggest concrete jungle disaster of a metro that you've ever seen in your life. It took, like, I want to say this. I don't hope this is not an exaggeration, because this is what it felt like. So maybe somebody that's in the Southern California area could verify. But I swear to God, it took like 2 hours to travel by car, like 3 miles.
Probably.
I'm not joking. It was absurd. You were just on the interstate, and keep in mind, this is a Saturday. I think it was a 2:30 game, 3 o'clock game, something like that. Like, it wasn't a morning game. So you're talking about a Saturday afternoon in LA, and you are just crawling on the interstate at like 5 miles an hour for hours. Terrible. Like, absolutely ridiculous, man. And then by the time you get there, you're on edge a little bit. I see why there's a lot of shootings in Southern California. People are pissed off. It's like you're frustrated in life.
Well, to your
right?
point about the facilities and the Coliseum and the mystique, and listen, Pete Carroll.
Don't get me started on the Yell leader. We'll go to there in a second.
Why did Pete Carroll allegedly get sideways with recruitment of Reggie Bush and other players? I mean, think about what facilities were back in 05. Back in 04, 05, Nebraska had the indoor facility built. Yeah. Even though Nebraska didn't put anything much more into infrastructure. I mean, they've done touch-ups and adds to the stadium. Of course, the east side and the suites, those are great. But just from your investment in a football program, even though SC's private, it's always been kind of a dump facility-wise.
Yeah.
But they've won despite. Why do they get in trouble from time to time, or why did they get in trouble from time to time? Because they never, ever took care of the facilities, or it wasn't a priority, or it was too much of a tug of war for it. So they had to get creative to get players, even though that player is 2 hours away or 2 miles away.
Right.
Facilities matter with it. But I wanted to get your take on SC. I had driven by the Rose Bowl about 20 plus years ago when we went out to visit family in LA. And it's just going to be an incredible setup with this schedule. And I know Elijah's pretty geeked about it. 2025 looks daunting. 2024 isn't easy, but it points to 2023 being super important to get your mind right if you're Nebraska. And Coach Rule, I loved listening to Trev this week when he was on with the network and him just kind of laying out, hey, let's go be a part of big games. Let's go win big games. And then let's go play some of those big games in November in Lincoln with some of our new mates that may not be used to cold weather.
I know it's, man, it's going to be interesting. And you realize the juggernaut monster that the Big Ten has become when you add USC and UCLA, which on its face, you're sort of like, that's two, it's one big time program and one sort of big time program. Let's be honest. UCLA has won nothing of consequence in ages, but they're always there, right? Tough out usually, as long as they have their coaching game right. Hey, real quick, got to get back to the Coliseum, and then I think Elijah is going to be able to share those schedules visually for our visual.
We're gonna
audience.
try.
Yeah.
It's untested, but I have a plan.
# technology. This is what we bring you here. At the Coliseum, I hope this changes. We were in one of the end zones, and so we were sort of like in the other corner was the student section, and so USC had their cheerleaders, and then they had this male yell leader
named Will Ferrell,
but he was mic'd, right? And so they had one of those old school kind of like conical rectangular looking speakers, that you see pointed right towards us. And I'm not kidding. This is going to be annoying radio, but this is as close to an impression as I could possibly give you. And I'm not kidding. This happened the whole game. You hear this dude the whole time, 400 times.
Go! 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 Beat the Huskers! Go!
The whole game. Like,
man,
dude, it was so between getting there, taking 2 hours, and then tailgating was cool. Old school USC fans were cool. They invited you in and stuff. They were, they were jolly. They were on top of the world. They're like, they knew they were.
Did you want it shaken or stirred?
Well, that weren't like that. Like it was, I would say USC was at least the ones we saw. They were a little more like hardcore. They weren't. It wasn't sort of like pinky in the air crowd at all.
All right, wasn't Beverly Hills USC?
It was South Central LA USC.
I'm sure those folks exist, but
they're not hanging with you.
I didn't see a lot of that. Those people don't tailgate anyways, They
just go from the club to the suite, from the suite to the club.
Exactly. Like you don't even see. They don't rub elbows with our type. But so you spend 2 hours doing that, and then you sit in the stadium and you have to listen to that yell leader. And it's like it's not just like background. It's not like he's just using a megaphone. It's a speaker blaring down at you, and you were just like, my God. Like, I just want to throw things at this guy. It was so weird atmosphere, really weird atmosphere, but worth it.
From just like a Big Ten point of view, is it not cool? I mean, the Big Ten is the home to like the cathedrals of college football right now. Whenever you look at the Horseshoe, the Big House, the Rose Bowl, you can even put Memorial Stadium in there. Like the cathedrals of college football are in the Big Ten. I think it's very, very fitting that like you're gonna have Big Ten schools playing in the Rose Bowl. It feels right in that the Big Ten. I don't want to go pull out legends and leaders, but like it's got some of the legends of the sport in college football, some of the all-time cathedrals of college football, and it's gonna just feel right in the fall whenever you're watching college football. And it's a home game at the Big House. It's a home game at the Rose Bowl. Like there's just this cool factor to UCLA and USC. The LA thing is weird, but I think once you watch it on TV, the Big Ten is going to feel like that historic traditional conference of college football where the college football you remember when you were a child, that's going to be the Big Ten moving forward because of what it looks like on TV.
It's going to look pretty good, man. There's some really good helmet games. There's some really good uniform games. Like, yeah, it's going to be solid.
I didn't even Happy Valley's another cathedral I forgot to add. Like the Big Ten's going to be so cool with just what the venues are going to feel like.
Let me ask you this question, fellas.
Just kidding.
Newer Ryan Field. How many helmet games should you play a year? if you're Nebraska?
By helmet games, let's define that.
Well, okay. Who falls into the helmet list? Ohio State, Michigan,
Penn State, Nebraska,
Penn State, Nebraska,
UCLA, USC.
There's 7.
That's 6.
Yeah, Michigan State.
Michigan State only on the strength of their helmet alone. They have just a great helmet.
Iowa.
I'd throw them in there. Whatever.
Okay.
Do you put Wisconsin?
Yeah, I think you put Wisconsin.
You can put Wisconsin in there. Put it this way: who do you exclude? Sorry, Northwestern. Sorry, Indiana.
Illinois.
Sorry, Rutgers. Sorry, Maryland. Sorry, Illinois. Minnesota. No, they change it too often. They added an or. What are they doing? So not them. Yeah. So yeah, there's quite a few. It's over half of the conference. Is it helping? And you notice with this conference, this is also something interesting. There's no cartoon characters on helmets in the Big Ten. You know what I mean? They are the classic logos. Like remember, you know how Kansas has like a cartoon character. They don't anymore. The Jayhawk.
And
it looks like
Minnesota does have a helmet where they have like a cartoonized version of the Golden Gopher on their helmet. It's like a big oversized version. So it's not
par for
there's
the
exceptions to the rule, but
yeah. But and very seldom do teams with cartoons on the side of their helmets matter. TCU was one of the first ones. If you have that, you're not for real. You're not a serious football program. Get the hell out of here.
Despite being a national championship runner-up, okay.
But I'm just saying they were the exception to the rule.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
They had this weird frog on the side. You never see that in games that matter. It's like it's Alabama, it's Clemson.
So we've determined it's 8 helmet games as we bring in Brandon Vogel, managing editor with HailVarsity.com and magazine. Vogues, we're chewing on, how many helmet games should Nebraska get or be in a year? I mean, how do you flex the schedule setup? Good morning, sweetie. How are you?
And that's not Chris talking to Brandon, by the way.
It's going to be so confusing for the podcast.
Listening. Yeah. People that are just listening are like, well, Chris and Brandon got pretty close pretty quick.
How are you, bud? I'm just saying hi to my wife.
Yeah. Brandon, if you call him darling, that would just be fantastic.
You can call me whatever you want.
Where were we? How many helmet games should Nebraska have?
Yeah.
Yes,
6.
sweetie.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think in a 16-team league, that's kind of where you're at. Non-conference scheduling is going to get interesting because if 2025 is the new norm for Nebraska, and at various times the new norm for any Big Ten team, like what happens to those? Do you schedule? I know these are scheduled out a ways, but do you schedule a Colorado again? Do you schedule an Oklahoma again? That part I don't love about this. I like the big, as they used to say back in the day, intersectional matchups that you occasionally get that way. But it seems like it's probably not long for this world if both the Big Ten and the SEC are going to end up at some point playing 9 conference games. Obviously, the Big Ten already does.
But you've got OU on the docket. You have the home and home with Colorado. Tennessee is 3-4 years away where you have a home and
27?
home.
Is that when it starts?
26, 27, I think. So you got to keep those, and you still got to keep those options available, in my opinion, because I want to see those. I think college football wants to see those. But then it's okay to take one of your helmet games off if you have a non-conference game, the magnitude of a Colorado or Oklahoma or Tennessee, or if you're going out of conference against another big dog, it's okay. I think that I would hope that the Big Ten scheduling gods take that into consideration. So you're not totally loaded up with the AFC East.
Yeah, and we'll see how they released, 24 and 25, which I think was important for people to get a sense of how this is going to work with UCLA and USC in there. But I'll be interested to see if beyond that, if the Big Ten continues to make these schedules that far in advance, because that makes it more difficult. I mean, you're guessing, like, look, we know Ohio State's probably going to be good, and we know that Rutgers probably is not going to be Ohio State. But beyond that, in terms of trying to balance these schedules out, it's tough the further out you try to do.
Hey, Elijah, do you have that schedule that you can pull up for?
Let's see if I can do this.
Okay, we're trying some technology stuff here. If you're listening on the podcast, Elijah is tapping into his graphical skills. Okay.
Has that worked?
It's not huge.
Do you zoom in?
Huge.
That makes my head hurt.
We're getting there.
If you expand screen is pretty good. Okay, so we have those up there now. And so looking at 2024 in particular, I want to kind of zero in first on, well, we'll get to Nebraska, obviously, but let's see what UCLA and USC's introduction into the Big Ten is. And when the schools in white are away games, the schools in gray are the home games. So let's start with UCLA. Somewhat upstart, right? Like Chip Kelly seems like he's got them kind of figured out. They seem to be kind of in that 9-win program type status right now. So away, they go to Indiana, to Iowa, to Michigan, to Rutgers. So they do traverse the coast to go out to Rutgers, and they do have a legitimate program or a legitimate bona fide national contender in Michigan. And then at home, they welcome Minnesota, Nebraska, Northwestern, Ohio State, and their protected game of USC. When you look at that, Brandon, and granted, it's 24. Who knows what's going to be quarterback then and all that, but when you just kind of consider the state of their program right now, how do you assess that introduction into the Big Ten for UCLA?
Well, traveling for UCLA and USC isn't going to be fun a lot of the time, but that Rutgers trip, I guess might as well rip the Band-Aid off in year one and be like, here you go. This is as far as it gets. But you look at that road schedule, Rutgers, Indiana feel like two pretty winnable games. We'll see where Northwestern's at a year from now, but that one's you'll take that. So from a strength of schedule standpoint, I think UCLA does fairly well here. You get Ohio State, of course you're going to play USC, and Nebraska should be better. And yeah, we'll see where Michigan's at, I guess. But looking at it, this is kind of I glanced at this when they were released. First time I've sat down and actually looked at some of the other schools. If I'm UCLA, I'm pretty happy with that. And we'll see. Replacing Dorian Thompson-Robinson is a big deal, of course, this year. But if UCLA does that, I think they're setting up, they're developing into one of the most physical teams in the Pac-12, which could help them, I think, in terms of the Big Ten move coming up next year.
Brandon,
one of the most physical teams in the Pac-12, is that like an oxymoron? I don't know. We'll see.
But Brandon, whenever you,
I think if they were to stay there, I think they'd kind of become the new Stanford of what Stanford was. But anyway, sorry, continue, Elijah.
Yeah, whenever you look at USC, they're not known for their physicality, especially in the past couple of years. We've only seen 1 year of Lincoln Riley, but Utah's physicality really seemed to give them some fits. And USC is a school that I think not only they, but the rest of the college football world kind of expects them to come in and really be competitive in the Big Ten early in their tenure, and that kind of reflects with their schedule as well. Do you think that's realistic for the Trojans, that they can come into the Big Ten and be competitive, or do you expect a learning curve for Lincoln Riley and USC whenever they do make their excursion to the Big Ten and have to start playing the likes of Penn State and Iowa and Michigan and Wisconsin?
Yeah, in that way, I do sort of look at this and think UCLA might be in a little bit better suited for what's ahead than USC. Let me see the Trojans this year, but last year was such a perfect kind of example of the knock, I guess, against Lincoln Riley's Oklahoma teams. It was they're going to put up points. They're going to score on everybody. Can you keep up with them? Doing that in the Big Ten over a 9-game schedule, though, is probably, it's either that or the SEC. Pick which one's tougher to average, say, 40 points a game. Ohio State's basically the only team that does that consistently. Could USC be that? Maybe, but I think getting used to that level of defense over a 9-game schedule is going to be a pretty big adjustment, because Lincoln Riley, he's a great coach and he's a great offensive mind, but he didn't have that to that degree in the Big 12, and he's not going to have it to that degree over 2 seasons in the Pac-12.
Brandon Vogel's with us here on Hail Varsity Weekend at Brandon L. Vogel. You just said the key thing, right? And this is what's going to win the Big Ten for years to come. How do you do it over a daunting 9-game schedule? I think the powers that be are going to try and balance it out so it sucks for everybody. And you got to adapt to it. But it's one thing to go get a angry, rough and tumble Michigan, or, man, it's hard to fight with an Ohio State or a Penn State, but it's manageable for the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day, and then you don't see them. Now you got to go do it every week. And I'm really interested, fellas, in how this stacks. You look at the gauntlet part of the schedule, and it could be a really brutal November. They've been tough Novembers for Nebraska since they've moved into the league, where a lot of times you're wrapping consecutively with a Wisconsin, a Minnesota, and an Iowa. And then maybe it's Michigan or Michigan State or somebody, whoever, that kicks off the end of October through the November run. You've got to be insanely deep, lucky, or just talented and tough to survive that. And it's still likely to go 3-1 if you have a good year. I think how they stack this is going to be really interesting. And TV will dictate who's playing when, and you're just going to line them up all college football season, I think. So it's going to be really an attrition thing.
Yeah, when you think about kind of the second tier of the Big Ten, which is really, minus the last 2 years, I guess it's tier 2 is everybody below Ohio State and Michigan. Before
and
that,
everybody above Northwestern.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of a good point. Indiana might get thrown in there in the Northwestern tier as well at the moment. But I think so. When you look at that group, I mean, we start out every season being like, well, this is just kind of, Ohio State has such a talent gap on everyone. And one of the interesting things about, I think, USC coming in is they are probably the school best suited to have Ohio State-like talent. They're not there yet in terms of overall depth, and the defensive piece of it becomes, I think, the big question. But so if you're in Nebraska, if you're a Wisconsin and Iowa, even a Penn State, like, how do you win this league? If you know you're just not consistently, Penn State can get close, but you're not going to be a top 5 talent team in the country. Those programs rarely have been, if ever. And it's just the hurdle that you kind of can't get over. I think it does come down to depth. And it does come down to being able to survive like that last 6-week stretch. Because at that point you're banged up by then. It's only going to get worse. The weather's going to get colder. Things are going to get less fun. The sky's going to get grayer. Seems impossible in the Big Ten, but somehow it always happens. Do you have the depth to like hang in games and make a run? Because it's going to be like Kentucky Derby down the stretch. It's going to be a tussle.
Yeah, and it'll be really interesting to see the timing of when USC and UCLA go on the road. I think it was UCLA's 2024 schedule that Elijah had up there, where they kind of go into the teeth of it. They go into Northwestern, which isn't, necessarily a tough assignment, but depending on when you go, could be Purdue and Penn State, right? So if those three are like November-ish, not something that they're accustomed to doing, and we'll see how they kind of survive the weather. I also wonder this, Brandon, want to get your take in. This has been ongoing, where you have two conferences basically, to the two big dogs. You got the SEC and the Big Ten. SEC schedules 8 conference games. They're adding Texas and Oklahoma. Big Ten schedules 9 conference games. They're adding USC and UCLA. Does that philosophy, that advantage for the SEC, where they only play 8 conference games, now get exacerbated because you're now adding into the mix in the Big Ten a couple tougher outs, couple much longer travel games, couple really high-end skill talent programs? Like, does that difference in philosophy now become exacerbated, or do you think it stays chalk?
I think we'll see. I was a little bit surprised. I thought there was enough momentum for the SEC to finally join the ranks of a 9-game conference schedule, but it looks like they're going to hold out until TV basically makes them do it. So I think it remains an advantage for the SEC for now. As we get into the 12-team playoff era, I was talking about this with Chris and Elijah on Thursday, I kind of look at the SEC and the Big Ten as the only 2 conferences that could potentially get 3 teams in a 12-team playoff. And I think if we were to see a 9-game schedule from the Big Ten, due to the toughness of that versus all these SEC teams being able to schedule essentially that 9th game themselves, and we know where that's going to go, right?
Chattanooga.
If they get punished for that, that could I guess be the inciting incident to be like, okay, if the Big Ten's going to finally is always going to have an edge in getting a 3rd team in, which I don't think will happen every year, certainly. But if it comes down to that, it probably will. I could see the SEC making the change a little bit more quickly, but how many years would you have to see that happen for it to be like, okay, we gotta play 9 games like the Big Ten is, because it's an advantage.
And based on what I've seen in college football the past couple years, I don't think it's going to come back to bite the SEC, simply because there still is that SEC bias, right or wrong. SEC is seen as the premier college football conference in the country. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon, unless, as you laid out, the 8-game schedule really hurts them. But I just don't see that happening with as much talent as you see the SEC sending to the NFL, as competitive as their teams are in the college football playoff every single year. It just seems unlikely to me that playing 1 fewer conference game a season is going to hurt them in the college football playoffs. As to me, it feels like it has to come down to the TV partners.
I think that's probably the more likely of the two. Throughout the entire history of college football, even in the 14 playoff era, we are conditioned to say 10-2 if you got to 10-2 by beating Samford in week 9 versus a Big Ten team that lost a tough game on the road to, say, Penn State. You just still look at 10-2 as better than 9-3, and it would take a long time, I think, to kind of rewire that piece of it. I think that's where the sport's headed, but it's never been that way previously.
Vogues, what do you think of the non-conference philosophy? Do you see the Big Ten easing up? Do they stay locked in? I mean, Michigan's had some of these early kickoff ball games. Ohio State has been fairly fearless with their non-conference. Nebraska's been very active and attractive with who they play in the non-conference. So the Big Ten's, Michigan State's playing Washington this year. So the Big Ten's always been pretty good. It's been their rule. You have a really good Power 5, or you have a name Power 5. And then there's a handful of SEC teams that have done it. I mean, Florida, they get the Gators at the end of the year. Florida State, thank you. Yeah. So that's built in. And then you got South Carolina and Clemson. That's built in. You see the SEC keeping pace? Are we going to have LSU Florida State matchups to kick off the year? Are we going to see Alabama taking on USC. Do you think they keep pace as well with the non-conference part of this college football world?
I think it gets tough to. I think about this, and even if the SEC's at 8 games, like, do you see a ton of like Big Ten SEC non-conference matchups? I mean, Nebraska
Would like
historically. Like, those are pretty rare. Like a game against a Tennessee, which I think was initially scheduled for 2022 and has been pushed back multiple times, is a rarity. I know when we've done like mailbags in the past and they're like, what are your dream like opponents for Nebraska to play? Like, if you're just scheduling somebody, they're almost all in the SEC for me, because the history isn't that long between Nebraska and a lot of those teams. And I don't see, with the SEC and the Big Ten having, I think, such a big lead on the rest of the sport in terms of playoff spots, but also certainly revenue, it's not to their advantage to schedule each other, which makes me somewhat concerned, because as somebody who wants as many good games as possible, like, I just don't see it. And, the thing with the SEC is a good number of those teams do have rivalries that, as Chris mentioned, there's Florida State, Clemson, South Carolina, Georgia Tech, which Georgia Tech is still a Power 5 team, even if nobody's really too worried about that in Athens at the moment. So you've got those pieces of it. Are you going to go and schedule a Nebraska or an Iowa on top of that? I'm afraid not. So where does the Big Ten turn? Does it go west? Does it continue to play some of those Pac-12 and Big 12 teams, or does it look more towards kind of good G5 programs? And I think that might be where they're headed.
Or do you become a 20-team league and you don't have you may have one non-conference, because now you have Oregon and Washington and North Carolina and who else? Virginia as part of your lineup. Maybe I think Florida State and Clemson, but maybe you go get a Miami. I mean, you may take care of it, and they may be just they may be in your neighborhood now. So it's just a conference game, but it used to be that awesome third week of September night game at Memorial Stadium.
Yeah, I mean, you could. We might be headed to a future where you try to get to 24 teams, and then we're back to divisions probably, and it's just a closed system. Like, you play the other 11 teams in your division, and maybe there's one non-conference game. I would like that, but I don't know. I mean, it's just like the idea of conferences and leagues is kind of in name only at this point, at least in the Big Ten. The SEC is still pretty regionally concentrated. So I don't know. Like, there's kind of no easy answers, I think, when you stop and really think about it.
Brandon, this is an off-the-wall question. We're nowhere close to seeing it, but with all the conference expansion that you see, do you think the end game could be the death of conferences in college football? Because whenever you look at professional sports, whenever you have these two big leagues that are competing against each other, it always ends in a merger. I mean, PGA and LIV, you have the NBA and the ABA, the NFL, like I guess AFC and NFC, like it always seems to be the end game whenever they have two big competing leagues trying to get into the same market. Do you see a scenario 25, 30 years from now where the SEC and the Big Ten cease to exist, conferences cease to exist, and you're playing more like an NFL system where, yeah, you're competing against the Big Ten, but it doesn't really exist anymore until the postseason rolls around?
Yeah, I think that one of the unique things about college football is that there are so many, like, the NCAA oversees the sport, but that's about it. It oversees it. And it provides a rule book that everybody agrees to, well, mostly agrees to play by. So, it's just hard, I think, to see the Big Ten giving up. Right now, it can do whatever it thinks is best in its individual interests. And the SEC can do that as well. And, maybe like a Super League scenario, which has been talked about, where it's like the top 60 teams split off. But I still think that would exist in a conference structure because, people care about the SEC a lot, but people care about the Big Ten too. And there's just so much kind of history and tradition wrapped up in it. Although we keep nibbling away at that when USC and UCLA are in the Big Ten now. And there's a couple big forces at work that I think you can see coming down the pike, and like in 24 and 25 in the Big Ten, you're eliminating the divisions, right? So there's no East-West. And you're just the top two teams are going to play each other regardless, because there are no divisions again. Top two teams are going to face each other in the Big Ten. So what's kind of happening right now, and I think up to now, there are sort of loopholes in the system where you can be at Michigan State, that's not a great team, that can kind of sneak into the playoff just by having a pretty good year and then win the Big Ten championship and all that. But going forward, just straight up winning, not winning your division, right? Not being the fast one of the slow group, but just straight up winning is going to be your guarantee to move on, right? And so that part's going to be pretty interesting. And then I think another big force at play here too, that will really affect the Big Ten. Brandon, I definitely want to get your take on this as you've been doing the team previews for the Big Ten. I have my eye on Ohio State as coming back to the mean of what they've traditionally been, right? So recently they have been elite talent, all that. You're a few years removed from Urban now. Ryan Day's dropped a couple straight to Michigan. We talked about USC and how they're not physical. Ohio State's been trending and drifting in that direction as well, right? I could see a case here in the next couple of years, and I know they have the overwhelming talent in recruiting, but style-wise, as you've looked into them, do you see Ohio State, say, 3 to 4 years from now, are they trending in the direction to where you think they're one of the elite 4 programs in the country? Or do they need to address some things philosophy-wise to not just try to throw it around the yard, which they've been doing the last couple of years, and it hasn't worked out? Hasn't worked out for them to get where they want to go. Yeah, I mean, I think I would still see them among the, there's the small handful. It might only be 3 teams right now that you're just like are truly elite: Georgia, Alabama, and I think Ohio State is in that group. It's a tough one there, because I mean, well, here's the thing with Ohio State. Like, the first thing I think of is they have been there really for 60 years. Like, go back and try and find the down period for Ohio State.
John Cooper.
It doesn't exist.
Right.
That's it. He couldn't beat Michigan.
That's 9-3.
But they were still
So quick nuance there, not to interrupt you, Brandon, but like, I'm talking about the difference between elite and very good. Ohio State has been very good for decades, like you're saying, but I'm talking elite, top 3, 4 in the country. They were not that for quite a while.
Yeah. I mean, that offense has been so good, and it is, it's an offense that could exist anywhere. It's not an offense where you say, oh, that's what they do to win in the Big Ten. And I think with their talent edge, that has been their advantage. They're not really – they're so talented to, like, all of the stuff we associate with Big Ten football, they just kind of trump it with talent. I think defensively they made some gains. Like, I think they're going to be closer to what they need to be defensively to not have these random upsets that we've seen, a loss to a Purdue kind of famously. But, I mean, it's hard. I mean, Ryan Day's lost 6 games, and he's only lost 1, I think, non-conference game, which was that Oregon game where Oregon came in and kind of smashed them in a real Big Ten style, like ran the football all over them. So, yeah, I don't think I see them trending away, like even slightly. But something like bringing 2 new teams in is kind of the thing, the kind of change agent that could bring that about.
It might be wishful thinking. I just think the further you get away from Urban, people undersell, I think, because he's such a weird guy and he has all these character flaws or whatever. But man, in terms of just straight up winning in a certain physical style that he imposed and really good defense, like the further you get from that, I think it's going to be tougher. And if you can't get on top of Michigan, it's going to get pretty ugly in Columbus, I think.
He emphasized a running game, and it's not that Day doesn't run the ball or have great running backs, but he wants to fling it around to Starvin Marvin Jr. and develop quarterbacks. And to keep all these great quarterbacks coming in, better throw the damn football. I mean, that's where they shifted under Day.
Yep.
Vogues, what's coming up with you this weekend? Go ahead.
Well, one more thing on Ohio State, like they've got a new quarterback again. Like, can you truly just run them off the assembly line of like the next first rounder is getting like 12 snaps a game for a season, and then they're ready to go and they come in and they can just do everything that they need to do. We'll see. They always have. So I guess they've earned the benefit of the doubt. Coming up for me this weekend, just got some more yearbook stuff that's officially off, but kind of some cleanup things on the back end. And otherwise, that's kind of the extent of it, kind of taking a little bit of an exhale after getting that off the print.
When does yearbook ship? When is it available in stores, and when does it ship if you're a subscriber?
It's scheduled to ship on the 18th, but it's one of those things where once they're all printed and done, they'll start sending them out. So probably in that week of the 16th, the 18th. So that's when we're expecting to see it.
Can you tease the cover or anything like that?
We've seen the cover.
Can you tease any?
Yeah.
I haven't seen it. I've been super busy. Sorry, I didn't see it. What? Tell me about it. For the folks that haven't seen it.
It's out there. Gabe Irvin Jr. made the cover. Chief Borders on the cover of the Special Kids Supplement. So,
Special Kids Supplement.
Just for you.
Yeah. Sharpie,
your kid's gonna have his own.
No, but real quick, Brandon, tell us about that. I just haven't heard much about that. I'd just love to hear about that, like the Special Kids Supplement. Great idea.
Yeah. So in the past, we've done a calendar like 8x10 size that we've slid into issues with for subscribers for those people who are subscribed as of the yearbook. This year we decided to take that same format, so 24 pages, and then make something aimed directly at kids. Like Sports Illustrated for Kids was a big deal to me when I was young, and probably had a role in what I do now if I sit back and honestly think about it. Yeah. So we wanted to do something kind of along those lines. There's a demo in there from Brian Buschini, who was great, like showing kids how to punt. So you get that. Chief Borders has a really good story. Aaron ended up writing that story about him, and just some fun stuff in there for a younger reader.
That's really cool.
Now, Vogues,
I haven't seen it because I coach baseball on the. Dude, all my life is just working baseball.
That's all right.
Here we are.
I have Gary Sharp's yearbook from last year still on my desk with Garrett Nelson on the cover. I will get Gary Sharp, the Chief Borders yearbook. I should say the Gabe Irvin Jr. yearbook. So, Sharpie, I still have your yearbook, bud. Kind of a a-hole I am. I never got it.
Well, but this is what Brandon and I have talked about this. Like, Athlon has their anonymous coaches.
Yes.
Great feature.
It's interesting to go back, and I have like all the Hail Varsity yearbooks, except for that one because Schmidt is holding it hostage. But those are interesting to go back and read because there's so much work that goes into them to get them out, and you get them out in June and July. They are interesting to go back and read in December to see how close they were to predictions or things that were said, like in the Athlon, of how close they are. If you go back and read Athlon's anonymous coach feel on Nebraska, man, it is almost spot on. So let's hope that if you've read this year's Athlon, that it's spot on when we get to December. Yeah.
Yeah. Going from the all
I went back and read
bus
the 20. Yeah, I went back and read the 2018 anonymous coach quotes to be like, let's see what they were saying about the start of the Frost era. And no, there was no sign of the trouble to come there. So, but I did check.
Vogue, you take care. Thanks for jumping on this morning, bud.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Yep.
That's so cool that there's a kids version. You know,
Yeah,
I'm
awesome.
happy about that. I'll be able to learn a lot.
No,
Well,
that's
it's-
for sure.
Hail Varsity is growing the game for kids like yourself.
Yeah, I know.
Well,
I
and
think
it
it's
makes
really
all
good.
those hard conversations about Husker football that you have to have with the kids about it just makes it so much easier whenever you have the resource you can turn to.
I'm wondering if we can also do like a kids version of this podcast, radio show, weekend edition,
every day.
audio thing.
Yeah, I think Saturday mornings are about as close as we get to kids.
It's like cartoons when you're waking up as a kid Saturday mornings, right?
As Gary takes a drink of Prime, which is like the most popular youth sports drink on the planet right now.
Hey, it's pretty
So
good.
that's, I hear you.
On cue.
Yeah, that's good.
Hey, try their bomb pop flavor and get back to me, Mark. Like,
You got
it.
some fruit snacks over there too, Gary? What's going on? You got the Prime.
Orange slices.
We like to call them in my household fruit roll-ups.
Okay.
Good work.
That's good.
Gary
Those
Sharp
are
joins
whole
us.
ingredients.
Yeah. Sharpie, are there gonna have to be difficult conversations moving forward for Nebraska fans, son to child, I should say father to son, and get your take on what was unveiled this week? Man, is it going to be problematic with the new Nebraska football and Big Ten schedule, or do you think Nebraska can actually get ready?
All right, so I'm going to be the old man and the young man here. Like, the old man of me, this is the last dance of college football this season. Like, the Pac-12 will look different. The Big Ten will look different. The SEC will look different. The college football postseason will look different. So this is the last dance of college football in 2023. And then, I mean, as much as we like to cling to the past, man, college football is no longer geographical based. So we're going to get used to trips to Los Angeles every year and UCLA and Rutgers playing in the middle of November. It's the way college football has gone. It's kind of exciting to see some of the new matchups. I thought the Big Ten did a good job. I think it's a conference where nobody can say, hey, we have an easy schedule. It's a conference that's, improving, but they did a good job with the balance. I think 24, because of a lot of teams were already set with their non-con in terms of the number of home games they have. It looks a lot like a division schedule. Nebraska doesn't play Illinois. And then 25, I'm not going to sit here and complain about 25, because if things are going well, that should be a year where you look at that schedule and go, man, what a great opportunity of Ohio State, Michigan, UCLA, and USC that we get to play. So it's just different. I mean, we're adjusting on the fly, and here we go with that kind of schedule. But I will tell you one thing. So the graphic you're putting up, first of all, nobody could see it. And then what triggered me is why is away on top?
Yeah,
It was a horribly done map key right there. It's so
and also-
confusing.
We're looking at 2025, by the way.
Yeah, so this is, like the Big Ten, this is a big deal for them. They should have embraced announcing this, because they got USC and UCLA coming in, and there's a lot of intrigue on how this is going to work. Man, they don't know how to promote themselves, because by the time you got to 3:30, which was an odd time the other day, at the bottom of the hour, this schedule had been released all over the place. I mean, come on, Big Ten. They don't control and promote their content as well as the SEC does. And that just blows me away, because they are a behemoth in college football, and they don't act like it.
Said by a guy who used to run promotions for minor league baseball, which are the absolute best on the planet at said promotions. So maybe you should send him an email, man, with some ideas or something. Or maybe we can start a little thing to like anoint Gary promotions director for Big Ten. I don't know.
Yeah, I wanted like all 16 athletic directors on a podium, and it's just like the NBA draft. There's ping pong balls, or there's like envelopes, and you don't, they just fill in your schedule as they go.
Oh, that would be killer. That is a great idea. That is an awesome idea. But you're right. Like graphically, they got the away teams in white and the home teams in gray, and that's opposite of like what all of our design knowledge or lack of knowledge. That's just
and then it's away on top and home on the bottom, which is backwards too. Like everything about it's wrong.
Yeah. It's weird. Now, I'm curious. Does this does the fact that they release schedules for 24 and 25, does that signal to us that if there is an Oregon or a Washington or a North Carolina or a Virginia or Miami or whoever that you might be adding later, is that a signal to us that ain't happening until 26? Or are they just going to be like, nah, don't worry about that last graphic, we're going to update it?
I think they leave themselves a little wiggle room. I know Trev said they already know who their two-play teams are for 26 and 27. I mean, there's always that kind of like mystery that is out there. But remember, this is the Big Ten. They just blow up schedules right and left. So I don't know if I'd read too much into that. But they do give themselves, if they do expand, that they don't have to all of a sudden just mess everything up. Now, the next part of all of this is when we get to, I think it'll be late December or early January, how this is going to roll out in terms of when you play the opponents that are on your schedule.
Straight up.
It's not because look at like this year's schedule for Nebraska, which I think is favorable for a first-year head coach. It's not necessarily who you play, but when you play them, i.e. Minnesota, getting Minnesota in August in week 1 instead of Minnesota later in the year when they're usually geared up and are playing pretty well. So that will be the thing that we'll watch of, okay, when do you play these teams, but also what does a UCLA and USC schedule look like? Don't cry for me, Argentina, or in this case, with basketball-wise, Serbia, with Jokic and Joker playing in the French Open. Shout out to all of our Serbian listeners of Hail Varsity Radio.
4. There's a lot of them.
Well, and then there's the Jokic brothers, so there's 6. But I don't want to hear about their travel, but I'm wondering, man, are they going to just be not going anywhere in November and just staying in Los Angeles? Because if that's the case, there's got to be 12 to 14 other schools in this league that are going to complain that they're getting they're getting a nice little schedule in November just because of the weather.
Gary Sharp's with us.
That can't happen. Sorry, sir, quick. Yeah, UCLA at Purdue in September. Not that big. UCLA at Purdue November 15th. Different ball game. But sorry, go ahead, Chris.
No, just resetting. Gary Sharp is with us. The weekend edition, the Iron Horse, recapping Nebraska's schedule and just how the Big Ten navigates moving forward. Sharpie, it was a no-brainer for Nebraska and Iowa to keep Black Friday and keep that protected. You have Minnesota, you have UCLA. Those are the 3. But Trev mentioned some gamesmanship. What's your theory about said gamesmanship? Was Nebraska the team a lot of folks picked as hey, we want you as our designated rival because you've been garbage? I don't think that's the case now with Rule in charge. But who do you think was the last kid picked for dodgeball? I mean, was Northwestern? Was it Rutgers? Who do you think?
Good on the Big Ten, because as they're looking at these like secret ballots coming in on who you want to have as your protective rival, somebody in the Big Ten office is going, why are there 12 schools that are picking Northwestern as their protected rival? Why are there 11 schools that are picking Rutgers as their protected rival? And, probably there were schools that picked Nebraska as their protected rival. You knew one. I'm wondering, does Wisconsin and Minnesota not see this matchup like we do? And they also may look at it from the standpoint of, you know what? We've handled Nebraska. We've handled Minnesota, what they've done, and Wisconsin's won 10 of 11. Yeah, Nebraska isn't that big to us. We'll give ourselves some variety. I wonder if that happened, and those 2 schools are like, nah, we're good. But there was no uniformity. Didn't you think that there would be a lot more schools that would fill up their full 3? I mean, Penn State didn't have anybody. And as a result, in 2025, for the first time in 30 years, we're not going to get Ohio State or Penn State. I don't know. That was a little bit different. But I'm okay with the variety for Nebraska because, remember, Nebraska is a helmet, and helmets are very attractive to television. So Nebraska is always going to have a fairly juicy schedule. It's up to Nebraska to meet the wants and needs of the television networks with how they play on the football field.
Funny you bring up the helmet, Gary. We were talking earlier, like, can you name a team that has a cartoon character on their helmet of consequence? No, TCU was like the first one to break through. Like, you can't have that. You don't matter if you got, like, come on. Hey, Elijah, can you pull up Rick's second to last comment? You see that one? The one at 8:35?
This one here?
Yeah.
Oh,
we were
yeah.
talking about the magazine. Thought that'd be good. It's Matt Rule in the centerfold. I don't think Hail Varsity's going that direction, Rick. I just think, that's
we are not, and
they
No,
might
wait
have
a
done
minute.
it with Frost,
Wait
according
a-
to what the
wait a
women were
minute.
talking
Wait a minute.
about.
No. This sounds like a great idea. Let me put my marketing hat on.
It says, "Is Matt Rule on the centerfold?" For folks just listening. No.
What if we had? You remember Seinfeld and Costanza
yes,
when he was laid out? What if we had that picture of Rule at the 50-yard line at Memorial Stadium as the centerfold?
Oh,
that
no.
would be on Elijah's ceiling. I'm kidding, Elijah.
There was a picture of
That went
Leach.
Tommy DeQuincy and Nooner right away.
Leach had that
So I
poster
don't
in
mean
his
to lie.
office. He had that picture of George in his office.
That's
Yeah.
good.
It's pretty
Hey,
funny.
Gary, there's a couple other things that we got to get to. We've been all scheduled so far. But Nebraska picks up a couple of recruits. You get Buford's little brother out of Texas. He's coming.
Yep.
And then you get Tyson Terry out of Omaha North. He's going into his junior year right now. He's already a two-time state heavyweight wrestling champ. Is he Harrison Phillips part 2? Is that a comp that we're looking at here?
I'm glad that you brought up that he has 2 years to play, because I think you have to be careful when you're talking about Tyson Terry. So I love linemen that wrestle because of the hands and the feet and just what it takes to go into being so good in that sport. Tyson Terry was not as good as a sophomore as he was as a freshman. Now, this is a really, really good pickup for Nebraska. I need more out of Tyson Terry as a junior, because I thought there were times last year where you would go and watch North and you never noticed him. Like he kind of blended in where he should be dominating. And I think he's got a head coach that rode him pretty hard, because he's like, you got all this potential. You got to get the motor going. And he did towards the tail end of the North season. But as a freshman, I thought he was great. Then on the mat, he's fantastic. He's a tactician. So I expect him to be a lot better as a junior, where the motor is going all the time. But here's the thing, guys, and maybe you three, as you've seen a little bit of his film, or you've had a chance to watch him in person with North in his first 2 years. I don't see him in college as a defensive lineman. I think his path to getting paid to play football at the higher level is as an offensive guard. But in North's system and on that team, what they need, he's not going to play offensive line as much as he's going to play defensive line. But I think he'll come to Nebraska as a defensive lineman. But it wouldn't surprise me if by the end of his career or early in his career, they move him to the offensive line and he excels at playing guard.
Because what you see on film is he is fleet. He kind of reminds me of that Machachik kid.
And I was going to say the same
South
thing.
Dakota.
Is that Machachik's the guy that they're bringing in as a defensive lineman, but I see him as an offensive guard as well. And we mentioned that whenever we talked to him on the air a couple months ago for our signing day show. Like, Machachik's a guy that I understand the depth in the defensive line means you probably want to put him there first, but I think he also reminds me as an offensive guard. With how
good
he moves,
feet and explosion.
Yeah, how he moves and just the way he is built strikes me as an offensive lineman. But Gary, really fast here, while we're talking Omaha North and Tyson Terry, does it surprise you that he's the first Viking Nebraska has pulled since 2015?
No. I think, Nebraska hasn't spent a lot of time in North Omaha, which is unfortunate because Larry Martin has a great career. I also think, they've gotten in there. So Champ Davis is now a sophomore that they made an offer to, and he is a fleet-footed wide receiver that is going to be one to watch. So I think slowly they're getting in there. They had those great teams that North had. They had a lot of fringe guys. They weren't necessarily Power 5 guys. They were more FCS group of 5 guys that I don't think Nebraska, those stabs, were comfortable in making moves. And also, I don't know if some of those guys were prepared to enter college right away. They went the junior college route or somewhere else. But Tyson Terry is a really, really good pickup. And it's a smart play by Nebraska. They immediately identified Omaha North as a place we got to hang out. And that's a tribute to Larry Martin and his fantastic program.
Yeah. Gary Sharp, couple minutes with us, weekend edition of Hail Varsity. Sharpie, let's talk some Bellevue West prospects. First and foremost, McMorris, chance to work out today. And I know Nebraska's in hot pursuit of him, as is the SCs and Oklahomas of the world, the Penn States. Also, your take on Davon Hall and that situation with Nebraska.
Well, let me go backwards. So let's go to Davon Hall. I think both sides handled this really, really well. Nebraska had kind of stopped recruiting him a little bit. And Davon, he was going places and he wasn't getting offers, which I wonder, okay, what's going on? And I think Nebraska, in their recruitment of him, and as they looked at what they have on their recruiting board, Davon Hall was not for them. And I think they really handled it well because they were up front with him, and he handled it really well as well. He could be really upset and throw Nebraska under the bus, but he said they communicated with him where they were going, that they were up front, that they were no longer going to move forward, and so the June 23rd visit is off. So I think both sides handled that really, really well. I will tell you, I've been high on Isaiah McMorris since the first game of last year when they played prep, and everybody was talking about Hall, and I said, man, Isaiah McMorris transferring from Millard North, where now he's in an offense that will feature his abilities better. Watch out. And he showed up right away. I mean, his catch radius was all over the place. I mean, if it was in the zip code, he could make a catch. And I was like, you got to watch this kid. And you saw that he has blown up. I think he's Nebraska bound. It's not just Danny Kalin, his high school quarterback, is going to Nebraska. I think as, the USCs and some of the other big schools that are recruiting him, I think Nebraska has said, hey, we want you. We see you like this. And I think that relationship has really taken off. And it wouldn't surprise me if Isaiah McMorris, I know I'm not going to put a timeline on it, but I think Isaiah McMorris will be a Husker, and that'll be two guys out of that program.
How much Michael Burt have you seen at a prep tight end?
Yeah. So let's be honest here with him, and I've seen him a lot, is not a lot of people knew about him because he wasn't featured greatly in their offense. Now, he was a good, sure-handed tight end, but they had a great running back in Brown, and they ran the ball a lot more than they threw the ball, so you had no idea about him. But he's got great size, and all it takes is one. Look at Chase Lofton, who's a 25 at Elkhorn North. You go to one camp and you get an offer, and what happens? It opens up the floodgates. Michael Burt is the same way. He's an interesting prospect to watch and what they do with him in that offense. But we're in a state of tight ends. Guys are like, because look at this. Carter Nelson, Georgia sees Carter Nelson, and they call him a jumbo wide receiver. Here we call them tight ends. Remember, Cam Jurgens was a really good tight end at Beatrice. And then they said, you want to make some money at the next level, we're going to slide you down the offensive line, and we're going to put you at center. And look at now, and he's in his second year in the NFL. We're in a state that, man, there's some good tight ends. Remember Ben Bramer at Pierce. A.J. Rollins came to Nebraska as a tight end from the same school that Burt is from in prep. Now he's on the defensive line. I think Matt Rule every year will have a pick of a tight end in this state. But I think Michael Burt fits that role as a good-looking tight end, maybe a Big Ten good-looking tight end. And that was a good offer by Nebraska. But he's somebody that quickly popped onto the scene, and you can see that the interest, especially from Big Ten schools, picked up quickly.
Hey, Gary, we want to switch over to baseball. We haven't spent much time on that today. Big moves made by Will Bolt this offseason. Says goodbye to Jeff Christie, who's former Husker. I think has a future in coaching. I think it was just maybe a little bit too early for him, and I don't know that pitching coach is his future. But and I'll just a real quick aside, all right? And this isn't to throw him under the bus, but I did get a chance to have a kind of a closer look at the Nebraska coaching staff and how they interact with players. And this is just my observation. Take it for what it's worth, right? So I was at this youth coaches clinic. So we're around them for like 4 hours, right? And each of the coaches are they're running through drills, and it's almost like you're at the zoo, right? Like all these people are lining the drills, watching the players do it while the coaches are kind of narrating. And when you saw Danny Marcuso do that for like defense, he seemed to have a pretty good relationship with the players. They seemed to respond to him. He articulated what he was talking about well. He did the same thing in the cages. When it was Jeff Christie with the pitchers, look, and again, this is just my observation. I just didn't see a huge connection between them, right? And Jeff didn't seem comfortable in that setting. Take that for what. So when I heard he made a move, I'm just sort of like, yeah, it might not be a good fit for him right now. I don't know. A good guy. It's not like he was a bad guy, but it just didn't seem like there was a lot of same wavelength stuff going on there. But for folks that haven't been keeping up, Will Bolt bounces Jeff Christie out of there and brings in Rob Childress, who resume-wise, you couldn't pick a better pitching coach in the entire country, resume-wise, than that. And then he also brings in Mike Sirianni. I'm assuming it's related to Jay. Don't know. And plays. He played at Creighton. He was a high school coach in Arkansas for a while. He had a stint at Iowa Western. He's brought in some really good recruits at Wichita State. What do these moves for Will Bolt mean for Nebraska baseball? What does it tell you about Will Bolt? And then do you know what this means for Marcuso, who has been the volunteer assistant, and I think a lot of people thought would maybe be that third full-time assistant?
Yes. So Jay Sirianni, which we played at Nebraska, head coach at Sam Houston State. Yes, there is a relation to Mike. So let me go back. Cade Povich will tell you one of the biggest influences in his career was Jeff Christie. Jeff Christie's issue is there were not enough Cade Povich's, Schwellenbach's, Emmett Olson's, and there were too many Drew Christos, high-level recruits that never you could put in high-leverage situations. He had a very up-and-down 4-year career as pitching coach, but I don't know enough about the relationship to know if there was a disconnect. I do know
and not to cut you off. Sorry, Gary, but not to cut you off. But I'm glad you brought that up. That Povich was high on Christie. This may be a case of Christie maybe wasn't great at managing the entirety of the staff,
and that's fair.
Versus a few top dogs, right?
Yeah, that's fair. But when you haven't been to the NCAA tournament, you haven't even sniffed it in 2 years, there has to be a fall guy. You get 2 outs probably in your coaching career. You get 1 to redo your roster, which Will kind of did from last year to this year. And then you get 1 opportunity to redo your staff. And he redid his staff with the caveat of, this is my year to get a third full-time assistant. Here's how I think this went down. And this was not a surprise. I think a lot of people around the program knew this was coming. It was just a matter of when was this going to be announced. And then once Rob Childress, who you remember was mentioned slightly for the Wichita State and Missouri job, when he was not getting those jobs, that means what's he going to do? He's in your dugout. He's right there. You're correct, Mark. His last 3 to 4 years at Texas A&M, they were in the top 3 in ERA in the SEC, and they sent 5 guys to the majors. And we know what he did here at Nebraska. So here's the, so you make an offer to him, and people have always wondered, well, what does Rob want to do? I think Rob's pretty content of, you know what, I like it here at Nebraska. I've got a daughter who is close in graduate school. I got a son that's playing baseball down in Kansas. Yeah, this is for me. I'll do whatever it is for Nebraska. And so Will makes that right hire. Mike Sirianni is very interesting because Mike Sirianni is off a staff that they blew out at Wichita State, but he's a really good recruiter. And this is to tie all this together. So Rob Childress starts following quite a few Wichita State players that are in the portal. Mike Sirianni is hired at Nebraska. It all connects the dots. So this is a thing that I've wondered about Will. I don't think Will has been comfortable in dabbling in the portal, even though Nebraska can be attractive against peer schools. So I wonder if now he will go heavier in the portal for this upcoming year. But when this is an important year on the horizon, and you know that you need pitching depth and you need 1 through 3, you need a good bullpen, you need to find those midweek guys. I think Rob is the really, really great hire. We're all going to look at it and go, hey, Rob's back. But I think it's more than that for Nebraska baseball. I think you need something good. You need some momentum going into the offseason because, remember, you lose 2 All-Americans. So it's a really, really good hire. But don't overlook, Mike Sirianni is a good addition to this staff.
Gary, it's still fun. You bring up Rob Childress, and you brought up Christo in particular. The thing that I remember most about the Childress staffs at Nebraska, and I think it carried forward at A&M, is his ability to get the most out of literally everybody on the staff. I just don't remember Nebraska having those guys that came in and like struggled with wild pitches, struggled with I just felt like you got your baseline, your floor from whoever pitched was pretty good. And then on top of that, you stack some elite guys, and it seems like that's been Nebraska's issue. Is like your floor is really low, and you just don't have a base level of performance out of your staff, and that seems to be like. Is that fair to say that that's maybe what Childress brings to the table? is that he kind of stabilizes guys, figures out what they're good at, assigns them roles, puts them in chances to succeed. And you put Childress directly with a talent like Christo for an off season, you might see a totally different Christo.
Well, I think Rob's voice will be louder. You know, Rob has great respect for Jeff and didn't want to step on his toes and would only chime in if he was asked. He followed his role. Now he's a guy that he's going to bend some ears on that pitching staff. Man, he's going to tell it like it is. I heard him first and foremost when guys, even the Comines of the world that were pitching really well back in the day, he got on them. I mean, he rode them pretty hard if they weren't throwing strikes. And his big thing is you're on scholarship to throw strikes. You won't be on scholarship if you're not throwing strikes. So I think he'll hold them accountable even more so. But you added a really important word, Mark. Guys will know their roles. I think there were times this year that guys didn't know exactly what their role was on this staff, when they were going to be used, why were they getting up and getting hot in the bullpen when it seemed like an ideal situation for them and they weren't brought in. So once guys get established and know what their job is, they're going to be much better. But here's the big thing, and I know we say this about sports and every team, Nebraska has to stay healthy. They've had some key injuries the last few years in that pitching staff that have really messed up either a rotation or what you do in their bullpen. So, you know, they got to get guys healthy. But Rob will punch some buttons that maybe Jeff couldn't get to, that I think you'll see some guys going, man, that Christo, he was on a milk carton. Where'd he come from? We'll be saying that next spring.
Gary Sharp with us. Sharpie, we will let you get out. Thanks for jumping on and doing a little OT with us this Saturday morning. And always appreciate your insight, man.
Hey, thank you. It's, what are we, 81 days till football?
I think 82.
Okay, 82.
Right? 82.
You're usually the best at that. You've always been able to tell us to the day.
I've been a little preoccupied, and that those days are running together, that Wednesday with the volleyball match and then the football game the next day, which might be, you know, like the best back-to-back days in Nebraska athletic history. I mean, how crazy is that?
It's 82 days, 9 hours, and 55 minutes.
Thank you, Elijah.
Good Bam. We'll see you guys a bit later. Thanks for the time as always, man.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah. Oh man, I tell you what, guys. By the way, pitching, like, and
I got to rock.
You got to go.
Got baseball. Apparently, I got screamed at because Junior and Mama had to go up ahead of me. What time you got to be at baseball today? 10. Oh, well,
where you at? Are you in Lincoln or Omaha or what?
No, we're going to be at Millard South again.
Are you really?
Doubleheader. Yeah, we play West Side, and then Mark Kraynak's fighting Bellevue West T-Birds.
Don't even try it. Don't even try it. The legacy I left there. Maybe Elijah and I can continue real quick because I got some thoughts on baseball.
All right.
You know, we don't want to keep you.
No, I love you.
I also have to baseball eventually, but I got a little more time than Schmidt.
Okay, this is overtime edition right here.
Schmidt, we'll see you Monday.
Chris, I might pop by and see you too, man.
All right, sounds good, fellas.
All right. All right. So, look, Elijah, you're around the game a lot as an umpire. You're around youth baseball.
Mm-hmm.
I'm around it as an assistant coach. Obviously, a different level, right? Youth baseball versus D1 college, different deal. But how mental the game is for pitching at all levels is extraordinary. And the way that Gary brought up the roles, and maybe that being one of the downfalls of Jeff Christie, it's like I'm telling you, even at like the 10, 11-year-old age group, one of the biggest challenges you have as a staff is to figure out, okay, this kid throws hard, but damn, when he starts, he can't find the strike zone.
Mm-hmm.
He psychs himself up too much. We told him that he's going to start 45 minutes before the game. He's in his head. He's a different kid entirely. He's terrible. versus like, damn, when we just don't tell him he's pitching and we pull him out of the outfield and put him in a relief situation, he is lights out. Like figuring out what the kids can handle mentally, where their heads are at. Are they better in middle relief versus closing versus high leverage versus it's such a mind bleed.
And one thing I encourage you to listen to, Mark, and any listeners out there who missed our interview with Jabba Chamberlain earlier this week, Jabba talked about his learning experience under Rob Childress. He's like, yeah, Rob gave me my slider, but the most important thing I learned from him was not on the mound. It was mentality. It was what's going on between the ears before I make a start, whenever I get on the mound. Because in baseball, there's going to be nights where you have it and nights where you don't. You see it in the major leagues where sometimes that pitcher that's on your fantasy baseball team has been killing it all year long. He shows up there and he gets 3 innings, gets lit up for 9 hits, 4 walks. And you go, what the hell happened there? Jabba was talking with us about how, you know what, with Rob Childress, it doesn't matter if you make it through your pregame warm-up and you don't think you have it. You still have to go give 5-6 innings at least. And there's going to be the nights where you're on it and you're going to go 8 innings and it's going to feel effortless for you. But that's not the vast majority of your nights in baseball. The vast majority of nights in baseball, you're working for it. Something doesn't feel right. You got to adjust to that. And he said his time under Rob Childress really taught him the mentality of what it takes to go be on the mound. So I really encourage you out there who missed that interview, go check out our interview with Jabba, because it really dives into his learning experience under Rob Childress and how Rob Childress helped him develop during his time at Nebraska.
And Rob is a different cat. I don't know if, again, the little window that we had at this coaches clinic, being able to see them up close, dude, he's kind of in his own world. Childress.
I've gotten the chance to umpire Husker Baseball scrimmage one time, and it was Rob Childress's first year. So this is like March of last year. I was out umpiring for him. Yeah, he's his own guy. He's
off in his own world, so that could either be perceived as, wow, that's a weird guy, or he's just a savant that looks at things differently. And you would have to say his career trends more towards he's a savant. He's just a different cat. Mm-hmm. He looks at everything differently, and I think people, like, when he's talking to you, you're just like, yeah, I mean, you perk up and listen because you don't know where the dude's coming from.
The
Keep
question,
you on your toes.
The question moving forward is just how long is it going to take for him to be able to instill his way into this Husker baseball staff? Because you have about, 9 months to do it? You have 9 months of off-season work to get yourself ready for a season. Like, the time is fleeting, and it's a do-or-die season for Husker baseball. It's as simple as that.
I don't think it's going to take long at all with him. And now, granted, this is entirely different era. This is 20 plus years ago, and he came with Van Horn, right? He came with Dave Van Horn, but the impact that those guys made was immediate. It was stark, and it was noticeable. I mean, it was not some sort of like process or whatever. And then as they acquired more talent, that's when you saw them winning games, advancing to the College World Series and all those things. But their impact and the mentality was evident right away. And is that all Van Horn? I don't think you can say that, because the way baseball divvies things up responsibility-wise, you have your pitching coach, runs the pitchers, right? Like, pitching staff was on point from the get-go. So was the hitting. So that's going to be really fair. Why do you say do or die? Why do you say do it? Do you think Bolt is in a situation where if they have a year like this year, where they're like 30 and 20-ish around there, I don't know what the final record was, but well above 500, had a couple generational players, did okay in the Big Ten tournament, didn't win it, but lost to the eventual champ. Why do you say do or die? You think Will's on the chopping block if it doesn't work out?
Look at the past 2 off seasons. Last year's a complete roster remake. This year is a complete coaching staff remake. That's I think all the evidence you need that Will feels the pressure on his job. I mean, Christie's a guy that he's been with for a long time, and I know we need to get this show wrapped up here, but to make that move, that kind of move, I think it shows the pressure that Will is feeling to get this thing right. So.
Is it the pressure that do you think it's external pressure of, oh man, Trev's breathing down my neck? Or is it more like, hell no, I'm not going through another season like this. I'm going to get this program right? I think it's more that than it is him feeling pressure from Trev, who has been vocal in his support for Will.
Just look at the resources that Husker baseball has compared to other teams in the Big Ten. You can't have multiple years where you're not at least one of the top dogs. Nebraska was a middling team this year. They were a bad Big Ten team last year. You can't have another year where you're not top 3 in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting to watch. I think Will's got a longer leash. I think you look at Trev and where his attention lies. He wants to be competitive in every sport, obviously. I don't think he would view Will Bolt as an issue that you need to address. right now, unless the wheels fall off. Look, if Nebraska goes like 500 or below next year, then yeah, you're probably right. I think the likelihood of that happening is pretty low, though, right? Isn't it? I mean,
you're losing your two best players, likely.
Yeah. Well, which again might be why he makes the move, brings in a Sirianni, who is a really good recruiter at Wichita State, top 30 classes. There's something like 30 guys in the portal from Wichita State. You might be able to get a few of them. Yeah, you do have to hit the transfer market, because I don't know where your sticks are coming from next year necessarily. Like, if we're to sit there and talk about that today, I think you can count on Karen as a pretty good stick, but he's a catcher, so his offensive numbers are going to wane as the year goes on. That's what happens with catchers. Yeah. Oh man. And then is it Anglum? Not Anglum. Yeah, Anglum. Who's the other guy that hit the close to 20 bombs?
That was Garrett Anglum.
Yeah, Anglum. You got him. Oh yeah. Well, Carey.
Yeah,
Dylan Carey, I think is.
It's going to be a different looking year next year for Husker baseball. That's for sure.
Well, I think you're going to have to, and I know we got to get out of here. Sorry, but I like baseball. No, but so one thing that Will Bolt grew up in, and I think he believes in and knows well, is small ball. You didn't see small ball from Nebraska, and I don't know if it was because they couldn't execute it, or if it was more based on, when you got somebody like, when you have the guys that we have, small ball's not the way to go. But you saw even in the tournament, even Maryland led the conference in home runs, also had that small ball element. That's what Will Bolt grew up in. They have not been that at all. I wonder
since
if that's,
that run.
I think you're going to have to, because you're not going to have a Max Anderson, because you're not going to have a Bryce Matthews, I think you're going to have to manufacture stuff. Right? I think it's going to have to be like bun a guy over, manufacture things.
And that's how they made their money back in 2021 when they made that run. It wasn't the long ball. They got timely hitting in terms of power hitting, but they made their money with that small ball. That's what Will Bolt knows. But it's also not the future of baseball. It's just not the way baseball is moving.
Well, hold on now. Now in the major leagues, we'll bring this back down to college in a second. But in the major leagues, they have eliminated the shift, right? I don't think that's illegal in college right now. I think you could still do it. I just don't think they have enough analytics information to make it as effective as it was in the major leagues, so they don't do it as often. There's some shifting. But I disagree. I think the game is going to come back to allowing those small ball folks, allowing the slap hitters to find a place in the game again. Because in the majors, the singles hitter, Tony Gwynn, Wade Boggs, Ichiro, those guys would have really struggled in the shift era. Right?
But I guess you do look at what Luis Arias has been doing this year for Miami. He's been hitting, I think, damn near 400, and like none of his advanced metrics would lead you to believe he's a good hitter. His exit velo is low, his launch angle is low, but damn, is he good at getting on base.
Punch and Judy, right? Just bloop, bloop. Yep. Just completely dominate that short porch, right? That little tween spot between second and the outfield, right center, left center, those little singles. And that's not small ball, like definitively, but I'm just saying, I think there is a place for those guys. I don't think you need a Max Anderson and a Bryce Matthews to be successful in college baseball. It helps, obviously. Duh. But I think if you have a roster of dudes that are in that 280 to 320 range and can lay down a bunt and can run the base paths, don't strike out a lot, and then you supplement it with dudes like Matthews, dudes like Anderson, now you're cooking. I don't know. And I think that's more Will Bolt's style. I think that's his natural style. Somehow they got away from it. Yeah, that'll be fascinating to see how they go. And because the Big Ten is only going to get more competitive. Yeah. I see them as, like, if you look at the trend line, I'm not saying they're skyrocketing upwards, but they're angling upwards in terms of overall competitiveness and being a player. Well, I look at them as like sort of a, if you do a football analogy, they're sort of like the MAC. right? They're like the and maybe the MAC's not the better, but they're like the Cincinnati. They're like the top end kind of group of 5. I don't even think you consider the Big Ten a Power 5. Like that's Big 12, ACC, SEC. Even some of the conferences out west
AAC,
and all that.
Yeah.
Pac-12. Like those are the baseball conferences, but I see the Big Ten as like that one that's kind of knocking on the door to try to get into that. They're just not close to it yet, but they're also not the Big East, right? They're not that. They're not so moribund. You do get Max Anderson types. You do get top flight pitchers at Iowa, for instance. Anyways, yeah.
Well, Mark, I think we'll wrap with a thought from Vic here.
Okay.
Gonna have to dock Schmidt's pay, rolling in late and bailing early.
That's a great point, Vic. What's this guy? He wins Nebraska Sportscaster of the Year, and then he just walks around like like his.
Well, you got your kid's baseball game.
Yeah, well, I got to be a good dad.
Do we want to talk about why you weren't here last week?
Wow, I'm glad you brought that up.
I think you were at a kid's baseball game.
Oh God, it's breaking up. I think we're breaking up, man. We might as well bail out on this one.
Right,
we'll
Mark.
address that next week, though.
Yeah.
Actually, we won't because guess what?
Kids baseball.
Wood bat tournament.
Nah. Well, Mark, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Schmidt and I will be back next Saturday, 7:39. You can also catch us all next week, Monday through Friday, 4 to 6, wherever you get ESPN, or I should say, Hail Varsity Radio. That's ESPN Omaha 590, KFR here in town, all our affiliates out Kearney, Hastings, Grand Island. You can listen to us and catch us in podcast form, Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, as well as the Hail Varsity YouTube page. Catch the show lineup on Twitter at HVarsity Radio Daily, and catch highlights from every single show on our Twitter page as well. Mark, any final closing thoughts here before we say goodbye?
No presence on MySpace, I noticed. It's kind of weird.
No presence on MySpace. That's correct.
I'll tell you what, I'll be up earlier than you guys next week, so if you need a wake-up call, I'm happy to do that.
Maybe we'll need
I feel like that's been a struggle here in the dog days. So I'll holler at y'all. 7? Do you want a 7 o'clock wake-up?
No.
7:15? 7:12?
Well, me personally, my alarm goes off at 6:30 on Saturdays, and then I, complain in bed for 15 minutes. We've lost it. Let's end it there. Mark, be good. We'll chat with you in a few weeks.
Well, there's a few things I want to talk. All right, see ya.
See ya.